I wonder if we got the right question.
Try and add a question to that, or relate
Yes.
the question to
Do.
Maureen. A lot of people talk a lot about energy. And I would use a different word if we weren't sitting here. It's such a loaded term, very large, one can say anything and everything, and can be quite bewildering. Yeah? And a lot of nonsense is talked about under that label, as well as some sense. So perhaps you could provide some kind of framework, shall we say, to analyze it in a more intelligent, informed way. Because people make a lot of tall claims under that label.
What sort of people?
Well, people who are ostensibly in the spiritual field.
When you say the spiritual field, which areas do you mean?
I don't mean in any particular religious label necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean in general, in the generic sense. For example, there used to be annual festival of health and spirituality and things at Olympia. And
All that, yeah. Great fun, wasn't it?
And you only have to glance through the brochure. I've actually never gone there, but we just looked occasionally at the brochure and the kind of claims that are made under the label of energy.
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
And a lot of these new cults and sects are making claims.
Yeah.
And I've even heard some people doing yoga making such tall claims about what wonderful things is done to their lives. But the reality often is much more prosaic, shall we say. So perhaps, linking with what Maureen has said, she could provide some kind of framework. Because there are a lot of gullible people in this world as well, and it's easy to fall, into the...
It's all a matter of demand and supply. I prefer to put it that way round, because without the demand there would be no supply. If there is a demand, somewhere along the line, someone will arise to attempt to supply it. One of the fairly interesting books, we've not talked about books, have we? One of the fairly interesting books that Lizzie included in the current batch was a book by an eminent psychiatrist on the guru phenomenon.
Was it Bob Sheldon?
No.
The one killed the Buddha if you meet on the road.
No. What's the bloke in Oxford? You knew his wife.
Anthony Storr? No.
Anthony Storr. It's a good book. It should be read, looked at critically. It should be read and looked at critically for more than one reason. First, it's a very healthy thing to turn an objective and scrutinizing eye on everything that you encounter that makes claims, particularly of a spiritual nature. Beware those who make claims. Because the usual, the most characteristic attribute one will find among the spiritually mature, I believe, is a very strong disinclination to make claims. present themselves not as something, but as nothing. Now, beware then the gurus and the super gurus and all those who utter claims on their behalf. The onus of proof is on them. And it's almost a certainty, not entirely, but almost a certainty, that if they strut onto the scene announcing how great they are, or how special they are, or how wonderful they are, they're just a bubble which will explode fruitlessly. People don't like to be told this. They like to project some wish fulfillment fantasy upon a convenient process of propaganda centered upon a personality. They're looking for it, they want it. They need Big Daddy, or maybe Big Mummy. It's immature. It's very childish. Much more important to be skeptical, to scrutinize, to employ the rational faculty, and even more, that faculty of viveka, inspired discrimination, that is alleged to exist among yogis. And it is unbelievably incredible, the rubbish that's floating around. As you say, this word energy. It's preposterous. And the titles people award themselves, not just the special clothes, but the special names. I once met a gentleman who wanted to discuss spiritual experiences with me. Very English young man, but he didn't have an English name. He was Mr. Tantramurti, which means approximately the power of Tantra. Now, since Tantra is itself the way of power, Tantramurti means the superpower. So I looked at Mr. Superpower and I was disappointed. So when he said he wished to exchange spiritual experiences with me, I said, well, I'm very happy to listen to what you have to say, as long as it doesn't take too long. But I can't tell you anything by way of reciprocity, since I don't have any spiritual experiences. He said, what? I said, no, I don't have any spiritual experiences. But if you want to tell me yours, please proceed. But, he said, oh, I'm wasting my time then. I said, I don't know, you must decide that. But there's nothing I can tell you, since I've got nothing to say. I can't claim anything at all. But I heard you had spiritual experiences, he said. Well, you don't want to believe everything you hear. Take it from the horse's mouth. I have no spiritual experiences. At least nothing that's worth talking about. Nothing to say then? I said, no, nothing to say. Good afternoon. What a load of taradiddle. I picked up something in the health stores the other day. It was a sort of directory of special people with wondrous powers and magical cures, and my goodness gracious me, what a load of old codswallop. What a pack of Charlies we are, eh? In fact, I've kept it, I've treasured this. I never read anything quite like it. Now, coming back to this book. I met Anthony Storr once. He knocked on the door and wondered if I could help him with his asthma. And the sad thing is that I had to tell him, it's true, I was so going round in a whirl at that time. I usually am going round in a whirl, one crisis after another. But I had to tell him I couldn't take him on. But yes, I could have helped his asthma, I think, because he wanted to be helped. Now, had we been able to establish a relationship at that time, the door would have been open for an interesting dialogue. Anyway, this book is very substantially a healthy repudiation of the whole guru phenomenon as it has appeared to our Western eyes in this century. I agree with a great deal of what he says, but you also have to look critically at the limitations of Anthony Storr, because he does throw the baby out with the bathwater. And he says a number of things which I personally would not support. He puts many things down to delusion. And some of the people he cites, I'm sure, were not deluded. And in dealing with the teachings that they uttered, he virtually throws out of the window all the evidences of the Upanishads and Buddhism and so on. Now in that, here is the expert talking. Intellectually appropriate, intuitionally very insufficient. So, when reading a book like this, we need to take on board the exercise of his considerable critical faculty on the guru phenomenon, but also the limitations of the writer. So it's a good book from that double point of view. I won't go into detail now. I thought he was quite good on the subject of Rudolf Steiner, for example. Commendatory. Now, this matter of energy. It's a very interesting question, of course. You could say it's the ultimate question, if you start going into it. Let me give you one little example. I remember when I started doing retreats years ago. In 1973. I was quite strong and fit then. And we did our first retreats. And I was amazed at the energy experience that was generated in 73. Amazed. I hadn't known anything like it before. And many people were, certainly a statement of facts, were strongly affected. Beneficially. And throughout these many days, as the only instructor, the outflow was whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At the end of it, I just collapsed like a wet week. Total exhaustion. But a benign exhaustion. But just nothing would operate properly. It was something much more than the expenditure of calories. Much more. Now, I remember some folks who I actually think should have known a little bit better. After one retreat, I was in my limp, exhausted state. And there was something special Lizzie wanted to see at the British Museum. She agitated a bit for me to go with her to the British Museum. I didn't want to go. And anyway, I did. And we sat outside some little cafe near the BM. And a scraggy-looking woman with some kids hanging on, pushing a pushchair, came and paused behind me and ostensibly was um, fiddling around looking for something in the pushchair, but in fact she was fiddling around my bag that was hanging on the back of the chair and had extracted my wallet, as I later discovered. And the question was, how is it you were so unaware as not to notice the loss of your wallet, or the possibility of the loss of your wallet? Answer: at the end of a retreat, several days, especially at those times. Take the ultimate example. Take the avatar. Take Jesus. I happen to be convinced, I'm not going to try and justify it now, I happen to be convinced it's impossible to kill an avatar. If an avatar is God, you cannot kill God. The avatar cannot die, does not die. The avatar may well decide for itself when to part company with the physical body. But you cannot kill an avatar. Now, what was the mystery of Jesus? Goodness me. More books have been written about Jesus than any other person in history. And the more books there are, the more commentaries there have to be written on all the other books that have gone before. So it's an endless industry. So what happens? How is it the death process overtook Jesus? Well, seemingly. What was he doing? Certainly, I think you can say he was confronting the shadow of the earth, the collective shadow of the earth. It was a critical juncture. The evolutionary impulse was winding down. The unfolding advancement was slowing. The function of the avatar is to regenerate, to revive, to restore. The evolutionary and therefore the creative impulses of the earth, if you like, to give impetus to the kundalini of the earth, to the kundalini of the coming age. I believe Jesus was unique as an avatar in this sense. That he decided to die. Now, you cannot kill an avatar. He will decide to die. He will decide to die painfully. Now, what happened to Jesus? The Buddhic level undertook to separate itself from the instinctual level. And the ego level, which as a functional entity exists even in the avatar, the ego level was left with a sense of abandonment as the Buddhic level, the true being, withdrew. Now, in this weakened condition, with the Buddhic level withdrawing, the power of the shadow overwhelmed the ego. This was only possible in a state of exhaustion. Exhaustion. What was the purpose behind that? The purpose behind it was, as the phrase goes, the descent into hell. That was the great sacrifice of the avatar. Not merely descended to the earth plane, but descended into hell. As the old creed puts it, he descended into hell and on the third day rose again. In order to reach hell, he had to become and experience hell and descend to the bound and the chained state. That those trapped in the subterranean regions of avidya. Do we know what avidya means? In the yogic sense, there's really no ultimate thing, such as evil. Evil exists, but not ultimately. Now, there are many words for light in Sanskrit. One of them is their word for knowledge. The word for knowledge, two primary words for knowledge used spiritually. One is vidya, and the other is gyan, usually by us pronounced jhana, have a banana jhana. Now, vidya means knowledge, but it means first of all light. So knowledge is light. True knowledge is light. Where there is real knowledge, there is light. The opposite is avidya, not light, no light, without light. Yes? So, beings trapped in the darkness are beings without light. He descended into the bowels of the lowest of earth's dark recesses. And then, what happened? My personal view, what happened? As a sudden, explosive fact, the Buddhic level rejoined the ego. And created an explosion of light in the depths of hell. Thereby raising up and granting the possibility of new life to the denizens of the lower astral. Releasing them from their trapped state, psychologically trapped state. So that the phrase he quoted as the utterance of his manifesto, "I come to set the prisoners free," was true on a number of levels. Not just applicable to the people he was addressing in the synagogue when he read that passage, but applicable in the subtlest sense to the earth as a whole, and to the trapped intelligences in the state of the fullness of avidya, without light, without knowledge. Boom. In order to accomplish that, the Buddhic level, which is light, had to depart from the ego level, leaving the ego exhausted and abandoned and down. And then the light had created a pathway through which it could explode into the darkness. We're talking now about energies, the descent of divine energy into the inertia of the ultimate of tamas on our planet. Tamas, darkness and inertia. So, the avatar did not die, but simulated the death function in order literally to regenerate the earth plane. If the avatar can experience exhaustion, so can anybody else. Now, let's come down to rather more mundane things. Might it be possible to generate yoga as a sort of alchemy, which would tremendously restore the psychophysical vehicle? We're not talking just about the mental state, but the physical as well. I think it possibly is. A valid theme and a valid thesis that one might call alchemy. Certain aspects of Tantra are alchemy. And the key to it is pran, and the most potent aspect of it is pranayam. And it could be that we could even surprise ourselves in what could be done in the focusing and the channeling of this pran. But it does require much application. It does require long and sustained focusing to the exclusion of most other things. Now, we've often said it, there is what we have come to call the anti-factor existing in nature. The anti-factor is there to challenge, ultimately to strengthen, certainly to create the barriers, the overcoming of which constitute the stages of initiation. The phases of realization in growth. Now this is a fact. I believe it's a fact. If consciousness has a raised vibration rate, which is the state of yoga, unusual things will happen. Negative and positive, if you like, for good and for ill. Negative and positive. If there is the vibration rate of shunyata, active within a human context, we're not talking about a mountaintop. We're talking about a situation where there's close proximity of one human being with many. It will affect the whole. It will affect the whole, maybe, in the sense of attracting people, uplifting people, creating an environment in which there's harmony and veneration. Maybe that can happen. The opposite is also true. Whenever the light flashes, a shadow will shudder and react and seek to destroy the light. It's an inevitability in nature. So you might have evidences of both phenomena. Where you have the individual of shunyata, you might have this harmonizing and inspirational impulse, or you might have the opposite. This is fundamentally why very advanced beings have found it necessary to withdraw, or at least to disguise themselves in their interaction with human society. What happens? No man is an island. We're all interconnected. What happens between person and person occurs much more on the unconscious level than on the conscious. It's happening all the time. Impressions being observed all the time, impulses being generated all the time for the receiving and generating of subtle energies. Now the one who has known sunyata has, by its very nature, what one might say a subsided ego. It's almost a man who is not there. Something else is there. Something nameless is there. Now, this energy is very destabilizing to the ego of us ordinary humanity. It's destabilizing. There are those who need to hold on to their self-image, to their self-respect, to their raison d'etre. Their ego is destabilized by what may even be a guiltless individual they will perceive as enemy. The story of Jesus is an obvious example, isn't it? So that light has to be smothered, or if possible destroyed, because the ego is losing its stability, it's threatened with death. Very interesting. Now, there are those who are riper, who have an inner impulse to move with this destabilizing of the ego, of the old nonsense, seeking to shed the irrelevant. So what happens? If a master moves in our society, however quiet he keeps, I suspect, I'm only talking about suspicion. I'm claiming no knowledge whatsoever, no authority. It's only as I suspect it is. Because I don't know any more than you know. As we said the other evening, the best starting point for discovery is to know nothing, whoever you are. Know nothing and let it happen. Now, when then a master moves into our environment, however unobtrusive that consciousness may be in its outer form, the egos around it will become destabilized, because everything on encountering that power has got to change. Sometimes it's ready to change, sometimes it's not. But the effect will occur. Now, sometimes the context may not be ready for the coming of this power. It could be counterproductive. Unless it was somehow submerged, limited, hidden by a cloak of circumstances. Now, let's put it this way. When the Avatar, when Jesus moved into society at, shall we say, the heart of the Roman Empire, inevitably everything in the planet begins to revolve around the Avatar who is the incarnate Sun. Everything ultimately is in the solar pattern. There is the power which is the source, if you like, the truth, which sheds its extensions from itself. In a sense, it's both mother and father. It's a mother shedding, emanating beings from itself, planets from itself, which then have to pass into orbit. Now that's true cosmically, as it is down to the smallest atom, which has the cosmic pattern. It's true psychologically and spiritually as well as in terms of physics. And when the great being comes, humanity, depending on its attunement, will move either clockwise or anti-clockwise. They cannot help it, because the ego will destabilize. They're challenged. And the challenge is the light invoking the light in them to effect transformation, change, through renunciation of the past. That's always the case. Now, what is happening today? We've said before, the planes are coming together. Meaning what? There are the so-called lower planes and the so-called higher planes. And those on the higher plane are those who have shed the irrelevance of past experience. And the light in them causes their psychophysical structure in its refined form, such as it is, to ascend higher and higher to the source of the light, to a dwelling place that's near the sun. But, Aurobindo says, there is a new force, something utterly new, entering into the evolution of our solar system. He calls it the descent of supermind, which will bring about change in many, many, many ways. That change inevitably will involve convulsions. But ultimately the pains of it, the rebirthing process, ultimately all is benign. Now it may be, that there is some, it's not the important thing to us in our experience, that we bother about where the planets are. It's a load of nonsense. It's one of the escape routes into which people depart when they don't want to face up to the essential problem of the nonsense that's here. I'll start studying the planets. Or something else. I'll become interested in the astral plane. I'll try and develop my astral projection. What a load of old cobblers. What matters is what's here. Then there might be some significance on whether you have clairvoyance or not, or whether you could do astral projections or not. The most ridiculous thing is people sitting down and trying to do astral projections. It's so ridiculous. It's so, pardon me. I've met some of them. Well, I want to kick up the bum. Because the problem is here. Here. Now, having said that, I suspect that it's the approach at enormous velocity of this sun called Arcturus, which is an aspect of the descent of supermind. Not the thing itself, but an aspect of it. Just as the visible sun in our sky is not the ultimate sun, not the true sun, but it is an aspect of it. So this something new is coming. In cosmic terms, very slowly, but it's coming. Now, more than one prophet has said, it's certainly in the book of Revelation, that the earth will change. The lion shall lie down with the lamb, and the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So it said. The higher planes are descending, uniting with the lower, increasingly. This is creating prodigious pressures as the light descends. We're talking about energies in convulsion. We ain't seen nothing yet. My goodness me, the turn of this century is whoosh. Now, as I've said, the old business of what astral plane is, it's all nonsense. It no longer applies. We're all together in the same blooming mess. And you're as big a load of Charlies as I am. We're all in it. Now, the ancients understood the meaning of Immaculate Conception and virgin birth. They understood the meaning of it. The meaning is not to be found in physiology. We're not describing a physiological process which may sound like an impossibility. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something much, much deeper. When great beings are inspired to become channels of the divine descending light, and in the process fuse and conceive, and the fruit of that conception is a spiritual being of enormous importance. The meaning of the Soma ritual is really about this union of heaven and earth, interpenetrating every level of human experience and suffusing the instinctual level. We're talking about energies now, aren't we? Suffusing the instinctual level so that all becomes light. And base metal is transmuted into gold. This is an alchemical expression. Gold is the symbol of the spirit, the colour of the spirit. When there is the condition of immaculate conception, there arises the possibility of virgin birth, meaning there's physically and spiritually the right conjunction for the incarnation of a great being. This is the meaning of the ancient teaching of the Kula, in which your ancestors, your remote ancestors, conceive the idea that a rishi, an illumined being, a rishi must procreate in order to provide the physical vehicle as well as the spiritual characteristics through the genes that enables the angelic level to incarnate into the physical. That's the meaning and the purpose of the Kula. It had the intention of the salvation of the earth by invoking and bringing the angelic into the earth. But increasingly we're coming to a great levelling. A great levelling. There's almost no such thing as the Kula now. And this is nature's intention, nature's purpose. Great beings are seeking to incarnate where there's very little appropriate Kula to receive. The old semi-perfect psychophysical specimens that procreated in order to enable the Devic level to incarnate, it doesn't exist anymore. Increasingly, it's people like ourselves. What happens then? People wonder, people marvel. We're not now talking about quite the level of the rishi. We're talking about something else. What is a genius? What is a genius? What is a Mozart? A Mozart's an impossibility. It's impossible. Michelangelo's an impossibility. Shakespeare was an impossibility, but it happened. How did it happen? What happened? A great being incarnated, if you like, this is putting it simplistically, into an ordinary context. This great power descended into an ordinary context. The context could not give expression in anything like the fullness of what was there. But what emerged was an imbalance in the psychophysical structure, in many cases demonstrably neurotic, but which exploded into glorious works of revelation in art, in music, etc., etc. Yeah. That to me is the explanation of Mozart, Beethoven, Shakespeare. Great beings who are greater than the context can hold. And so there's visible imperfection in the manifestation. There are many aspects to this. Some of the great ones, it may be, descend into a genetically insufficient structure, quite deliberately. And nature keeps that contained because nature wishes to uplift the psyche of the earth, of which we're all part, but not to a degree that will release more energy than is constructive. Too much exploding power will produce a destabilization which is not helpful necessarily. Do you see what I mean? Are you with me? Are you following what I'm trying to say? Don't opt for any simple specious rationalization that if you got it right, that everything is going to come into easy harmony. Not so. There's always a mystery beyond a mystery and a question beyond a question. I think that's all I'm going to say tonight. And for goodness sake, think critically about the gurus and about all the Charlies with their silly claims. One of the truest words was spoken by Lao Tzu. He spoke many true words, paradoxical words. They who know do not speak, they who speak do not know, and never has there been more need than now to reflect on the meaning therein. It's all demand and supply. Tell them what they want to hear and you'll get the customers. Tea?